while we wait for Loke to return, do you have any thoughts looking through this? Like, what are your main takeaways looking at this deck?
I'm afraid the Illuminati is going to get me if I talk about this deck anymore. They've already got Loke.
7 million.
7 Point Highlander.
Hello, and welcome to the 7 Point Cast. My name is Liam, and I'm joined by my co-host Mouse.
Hey, very excited for this episode.
Today we're joined by Loke from Canberra. Loke, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you see yourself in 7 Point Highlander?
G'day. Yeah, I've been playing 7 Point Highlander, I think, for probably over 15 years now. And I started out with like mono black with like Skull Clamp, and Bloodgast, and then I invested in a Time Vault. Played Blue-White Time Vault for a long time, and then I played like Blue-Red Snake and Show kind of combo, like Marta Crypt Tinker, that kind of stuff, a long time. So I've always been interested in combo, and also interested in trying to do the most unfair thing possible.
Nice.
There was a lot of time I spent brewing by saying, okay, I'm going to spend 4 points on Lotus. What can I do with it?
Yeah.
And in the Discord, for those of you who don't know, in the Discord, Loke's name is Absurd Deck Name. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I guess I just have a history of giving my creations peculiar names. For a long time, I went through a cycle of naming my decks after old Australian TV shows.
Nice.
It was the Lands deck I built probably in, I think it was 2016 or something, was called Gardening Australia. I've also, if you look through my Moxfield links, you'll see a lot of decks that are named after Australian TV shows.
So I didn't even realize that Gardening Australia was you. Like, in my head, I was just like, oh, Lance in 7 Point Highlander. You know, all of the old hats know that it's really called Gardening Australia, but I
Yeah.
didn't know it was you.
Well, originally it was Burke's Backyard, but then decided to change that to Gardening Australia. Probably the one I'm most well known for is Big Roddy's Rip and Rib Shack.
Yes.
Which was it's actually a restaurant in Brisbane that we went to. I still have a bunch of stickers from there. Big Roddy's Rip and Rib Shack. It's on one of my deck boxes, and it was a like Tin Fins kind of like reanimated storm list that I built to prove to people that Tainted Pact wasn't worth a point. This is before Thassa's Oracle, obviously.
Yeah.
But then the event I played it in ended up winning. And I was like, well, it kind of made me realize how difficult it is to prove something isn't worth a point. Because if you do well with it, people are like, well, should be a point. If you lose, no one cares. So it's a tricky situation.
Well, actually, speaking of things that may or may not be worth points or less points, I feel like the kind of Time Vault demographic is almost famously always saying that it's worth too many points. You said that you have invested. Which side of the fence do you fall on?
Definitely, it feels like it's been at its current level of points for a long time without much experimentation. But I don't necessarily. I think it's warranted because, like, obviously the financial side of the card really impacts like people's ability to just give it a go. But yeah. The ability to interact with artifacts as a permanent type has only gotten more available to people, and especially with a combo like Time Vault, it's all sorcery speed, but it is colorless. So if it was low enough points, and you had enough synergies that you could kind of build around it, it's pretty easy to put in any shell, which makes it maybe a bit of a problem.
Do you remember the decks that used to exist where like they were Time Vault combo decks, but they were actually just kind of almost like banned aggro decks where randomly you'd pod into those decks sure, but that in my mind, when people say Time Vault, that's the deck which I remember like being just a total menace at one point.
Jacob Dunn used to play it a bunch. Time Vault Pod, and the deck was ostensibly what Walk's combo is now.
Yeah,
It was
true.
it selected that Time Vault as the card to kind of center all of its stuff around, and Birthing Pod was the thing that tutored up the thing to untap Time Vault. You know, you had Kikijiki combo in there, and also the all of the untap effects that combo with Kikijiki also were time walks with Time Vault. So
I think we might have lost you to sound a little bit, but you're saying that, yeah, like Perthing Pod would basically tutor up all of the Deceiver, Exarch-esque effects, all those things to untap Time Vault. Including, I believe,
yeah.
Laura's Companion was making it in, I think, just even as like a creature that could do the combo all by itself. Or is it Kuro's follower?
Yeah, there was really Kuro's follower, yeah. And Commander All-Star Derevi, Imperial Tactician. Nuts stuff with Derevi.
Right, well, like Lee might take us to the deck list which you've brought here, which is kind of like your more recent creation.
Yeah.
Breachbond. Why is Stroke of Genius the card emblem for this one?
Well, because Loke's a bit of a prolific deck builder, I thought the Stroke of Genius was pretty appropriate, given that this deck is it's pretty unique.
Yep, fair enough. All right, so we've got in front of us some of the key cards. Do you just want to give us a breakdown of how this deck works?
Yeah, so we have obviously the Fastbond Crucible Zeranorb combo. Fastbond allows you to play in a number of lands. Crucible, you can play lands from your graveyard. Zeranorb, you can sack a land to gain 2 life. So every land you can replay over and over again. And you can get a bunch of mana and a bunch of life on the way. The lands back in your graveyard. If you have one of the Horizon lands, you can draw your whole deck.
Yeah.
How that fits into the overall strategy is with Underworld Breach, you often have cards like Savin's Reclamation, Intuition. You're putting a lot of cards in your graveyard. Life the Loam, you can recur land out of your graveyard. And the whole deck kind of has this little package that works around the graveyard. And essentially, I wanted to build a Walks style shell, but I didn't have access to a Time Walk. So I was like, well, a lot of the mid-range threats in the Walks deck are very powerful, but they have nothing to do with the card Time Walk. Like, they obviously have synergy with taking extra turns, because every turn that they're on the battlefield, they're accumulating you advantage.
Yep.
But in themselves, they're just engines to win the game. And the shell itself spends a lot of points on Time Walk. And you also have Spellseeker as part of that. So you're kind of like locked into 6 points now just on the Time Walk combo. And I was like, well, the Breach package, Breach is 3, Intuition is 1. That's only 4 points. It leaves you a lot of breathing room to play either the pointed, powerful mid-range cards, which is where I'm at now, or where I initially started was once Demonic Tutor got reduced to 2. I had a full 5-color deck. The mana base was a nightmare because I had Flage in there. I had black spells to cast, Psychic Frog being one of them,
Right.
and Shifting Woodland asking you for GG.
And a forest
And
already in play when you play.
yeah. So figuring out the mana base and timing that with tap lands and try lands and surveil lands and fetching, it proved to be Demonic Tutor added a tremendous amount of consistency, but it proved to be way too much pressure on the mana base.
Yeah.
and especially when Flage and Fable copped points, it meant that your mid-range plan wasn't as supported, and you were kind of an all-in combo deck that had slightly less complicated mana without Flage, but still pretty intense mana requirements. So I was like, well, I can cut Demonic Tutor, I can keep Fable, and I'll add in 4th Aelingus, and I'll add in Gifts Ungiven. And Gifts Ungiven has been tremendous in improving consistency, so it adds that kind of power that Demonic Tutor adds. And then the 4th Aelingus is the best win condition when you have infinite mana and through Fastbond combo.
Right,
Because obviously you kill them with all your Trampling Horsemen, but it is a fireball that along the way can just win you the game when you cast it for 3. Even when you just have Life Loam and Fastbond, you end up with 5-6 lands and you tap them all, send some horsemen in.
Yeah. So can I ask, you still run the traditional intuition package for, to turn the breach on. But gifts is functionally the same thing as intuition in this deck, right? Like you can assemble piles that they need to give you. I think everyone knows the traditional intuition pile of Sabine's, LED, and Breach. Is there like a stock standard gifts pile, or is that one a little bit more complicated?
No, you really just depending what you have in hand, but you just get Breach, LED, Brain Freeze, Savins, and that's going to get you there, no matter what they give you.
Yeah.
And you can also supplement that with Fastbond combo if you want, because you can get Fastbond, Crucible, Zero Orb, Savins.
Yeah.
And that'll usually get you, if not the full combo, enough that you're able to string something together.
Do you think that Gifts Ungiven is underexplored in more traditional breach lists? Like, do you reckon they should be giving it a go, or is it very much a feature of your deck?
I think if you were to, as I've done, give up Lurrus, which is a consideration that I didn't take lightly, I guess, because Lurrus is really, really good, and I think Lurrus Breach is still really, really good. If you were to give up Lurrus, Gifts has been very, very strong.
Yeah.
But Breach has a reputation for being a pretty complex deck. Not because the combo itself or the game plan itself is inherently complicated. It's more what happens when something goes wrong. Trying to develop intuition piles and Gifts Ungiven piles when you're not just going for the combo can be really difficult, especially if you don't have as much recursion, or your deck is like pretty low on threats. I've done intuition piles where I went for, it was like Aragorn, Omnath, and Fury, because I just needed something to get on the board and put me ahead and keep me ahead.
Well, yeah, maybe we can go to the next slide, because like nominally on the slide we're looking at, like a lot of this instant sorcery package, I think people are going to already associate with just the traditional breach list, except for maybe like Malevolent Rumble and Life from the Loam. But really, you were saying it was hard to give up Lurrus, but there were compelling cards to do so. So let's talk about some of those cards. Like, what are the main draws away from Lurrus? Like, where this deck uniquely gets some of its power?
Honestly, the main draw card is green. The traditional Lurrus decks don't want to play green, and but Fastbond combo was really attractive to me, and particularly Malevolent Rumble. If you look at some of the breach lists in Modern, that's really where a lot of the inspiration for this deck came from. Was just thinking about, man, Malevolent Rumble is such a sick card. It works so well with Breach.
Yeah.
I've got to be able to put something together here. And if you look at the threats that I've chosen, green obviously plays a big role in that. Access to cards like Omnath, access to cards like Morlock and Territorial Kavu. They're just bodies that are well statted and provide you advantage Obviously, Omnath has a lot of synergies with Fastbond and Crucible and keeping that kind of stuff going. And then Territorial Kavu and Morlock were inclusions that I put in when I played at the Winter Library RC, and I wanted threats that I thought were good against Mardu and could stabilize a board and be big enough and provide enough kind of advantage to put me ahead and keep me ahead. And that's why I added something like Aragorn as well, because the life swing, the monarchy, just very, very strong stats.
I definitely agree that like cards like Kavu and Morlock, they're very tempo positive because they do tend to provide like a that bit of incidental interaction. That the stats are really excellent. I am noticing though that like in terms of cards which seems to throw greater, like it really is just like Teferi, Aragorn, Omnath. I guess Fury as well.
Well, the Crucible is the one that really tips you over. Like the Fastbond combo is really what keeps you away from Lurrus. And on note, one of the cards I see here, Ajani. I was not a believer in Ajani. I really didn't think it was going to be that good. Evidently, I've been proved pretty wrong. And I actually added this in just for the national champs at CanCon. And unbelievable. I could not believe the number of games where I flipped Ajani and managed to assemble a red permanent out of my deck somehow, and just it ran away the game. Just like there's no other card in that spot that would both progress my board state and also remove my opponent's creatures.
Yeah, the removing creatures is so big, hey, because it's kind of like when you've got the initiative, it's not enough for them to just play a dude. They've got to like play two dudes to play a dude immune to remove. And in Ajani, it's kind of like a one-sided abyss once you've got the red permanent.
Yeah, and the number of red permanents in this deck are pretty low, so your opponent often will underestimate whether or not you'll actually be able to use the second ability. But a lot of the time it really comes up, and especially with keeping Fable in the deck, that card alone generates 2 red permanents. So it's often if they deal with one, you've still got one kind of lying around.
Yeah. So this deck is kind of almost is the classic mid-range hybrid, mid-range combo hybrid plan, in the sense that if they just ignore the mid-range plan, like they are going to die. Like these are big dudes, the board presence is going to be pretty thick, and you don't need the combo to kill them. But you're hoping that in them having to tap out to deal with like problematic permanents like Ajani and Fable, that they're going to expose themselves to like a vulnerability where one of two combos will really put the game away. When you play the deck, do you find that the deck is winning more with the mid-range plan or more with the combo plan?
I think a lot of games are decided by the combo plan, but that's often kind of a symptom of just you draw intuition or you draw gifts ungiven, and it just leads you to winning with the combo. Because there's certainly games where I've been ahead on board, and whether or not, if we had the opportunity to kind of trade resources back and forth, maybe I would win by damage, maybe I wouldn't. But the I win button of intuition and gifts, you're obviously not going to go for it.
Yep. Yeah, it's fair enough, and that's why you kind of say this is kind of like the Walks deck, except like their I win button is Spellseeker, whereas you've got intuition. Yeah. One of the things I'm interested as well, right, is that like one of the things which really impressed me about this deck the first time I saw it is that no one else was doing this. And you're kind of almost like the one guy doing it, and your results have been really consistent, right? Like this deck is always producing a positive record. It looks like at the major tournaments. Like why aren't other people picking this up, do you think? Is it just like is it specifically like you need to be Loke to play this, or what do you think?
I think it's a combination of Breach's reputation as being difficult. The deck is absolutely not cheap financially. You need LED and you need a shitload of duels. And even the intuition is like 150, 200 bucks. Like there's a significant financial barrier, and I think that's definitely a consideration. And a lot of people and a lot of competitive players, I think, would look at this deck and be like,
Well, I'm not sure if we've lost you or if it's just me.
No. This is what the competitive players are like.
Right, they're looking at it and it's complete silence. Oh man, have we lost Loke actually? I'll tell you what, that's a hell of a cliffhanger to end on. The competitive players look at this deck and it is
Tune in
nothing.
next week.
It's shooting next week to find out the answer. Maybe Liam, if while we wait for Loke to return, do you have any thoughts looking through this? Like what are your main takeaways looking at this deck?
I'm afraid the Illuminati is going to get me if I talk about this deck anymore. They've already got Loke.
Yeah.
Look, one thing I was going to ask is there's Crucible of Worlds in here, but whether or not
can you hear
the
me?
walk-in closet is worth playing.
Right, yeah. So we have got you. I think
Okay, sorry, apologies.
that's right. You actually left on a really funny cliffhanger where you're like,
Yeah.
competitive players look at this deck and then it just completely.
Yeah, I
But,
think
after you finished that thought, Liam was wondering about walk-in closet, which I believe I have seen
yes.
in previous iterations. But yeah, just
Yeah.
take it away from where you left off.
I think they look at it and they're just like unsure about it because it looks kind of weird. And like, why wouldn't I just play traditional Lurus Breach that has a storied record, namely in the hands of Brennan, and a lot of evidence behind it? But now that the deck has put up some consistent results, I hope people will look into it and explore it because it's a lot of fun and it's a lot of there's a lot of cards in the deck that feel very flexible in a way that I think some of the Lurus Breach lists are like, there's like you got like a hard 65. Most of your stuff, it's like, well, do I play Dread Fugue? Do I play Dreams of Steel and Oil? Like that. You're talking about that kind of minutia. Whereas like, really, I've tried a lot of different threats in this Breach deck and a lot of different plans, like the walk-in closet. Ultimately, I moved away from walk-in closet purely because I wanted a Crucible that I could Savin's Wreck back, and because when I was adding in the gifts plan, that became more important than it was previous. But when I played walk-in closet, I did unlock the other side. I've no idea what it's called, but I did unlock the kind of Yogmoth Will side, and it was relevant. And but yeah, the Savin's synergy, I felt like it was worth just playing the raw Crucible. And sometimes your opponent will Blood Moon you, and that's relevant. But
And what do you think about the new one? Yeah, I don't know the name off the top of my head, but it's one blue green for an enchantment, and when it enters, you can choose it to either be a Crucible of Worlds or a whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, mill target player for 3 cards. Does that card have
I think
legs?
it's four. I think it's 4 cards. And I think the 4 cards really makes a difference. But my initial reaction was, seems like a Crucible that's gonna get Red Elemental blasted. But I think the modality of it's pretty interesting in this deck in particular because you really do care about both sides a lot. And I think in order to use it in Breach, you kind of need like a Strike It Rich or a Metamorphose or some kind of spell-based ritual to like keep it going until you find the Brain Freeze.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll definitely consider it.
Yeah, I think called Glacierwood Siege. But yeah, it's funny, right? Like it almost feels like what could Wizards print, which almost looks like it's made especially just for this deck, but we're not quite sure if it's good enough.
Yeah. It is very card generation esque of like what could I think of? Yeah.
Lime, you got any other questions before we move on to the more kind of Brewers ethic?
No, I don't. But what I will say, preface this before we move to the next slides, is that for those who don't know, if you don't follow the Canberra events result channel on the Discord, for a very long time, continuingly, in the like the 201 or the 30 spot, there's always the Loke's Binder deck. We don't know what the deck is; it's just Loke's Binder. And these are some cards that Loke has highlighted to us that might be making it into a binder deck pretty soon. So what?
So basically, the past maybe year and a half, every Monday I'll just build a new deck, and my process is extremely inefficient. Because I just have like a fat pack box of cards I want to build around, and I'll just look through that until I find something that makes me feel something, and then my Highlander collection is sorted by color, and I will just look through every card I own and pull out cards that I think will go with whatever I'm trying to build around. Until I've got a big stack in front of me, and then just slowly whittle away until I've got a 75.
Nice.
And Karuga is definitely high on the radar. Pet card of mine. I played it down in Melbourne for the POG event that I was like teams one day, single the next day. Didn't do too crash hot. It's really Highlander is really a format where turns 1, 2, and 3, man, a lot of stuff happens, and it's surprising the ways that you can interact on those turns despite meeting Karuga's condition. But whew, it's tough. And
for those who aren't fully aware of Kruger, like the companion, the condition is that you can only play things which cost 3 or greater. But typically, the way which people get around this is that they play either like adventure cards like Brazen Borrower or the Bonecrusher Giant because the card costs 3 but the adventure costs 2, or like cost reducing cards like Mystical Dispute like cost 3 but if it targets a blue spell it costs 1. Or I imagine like the impending creatures, like you could impend them for less even though their retail mana cost is quite high. I guess like Leyline Binding is another like poster child of like it costs 6 but really you're playing it for 1 or 2. Is there a critical mass of these cards to make this work in Highlander, do you think, or are we just waiting for more printings?
we're pretty close. I think the biggest problem with Karuga is that so when you companion Lurrus and Lutri, there's massive upside. You get rewarded. When you companion Karuga, there's no payoff. You just get a 5/4 that might draw you a card. Like, I think that's the biggest challenge is that you go through all these hoops and you get to play a bunch of really interesting and weird cards. All the split cards and all the aftermath cards, they all count because they have combined mana cost, that kind of thing. You get to play a lot of interesting cards, but your selection of good cards, well, that's not very high. And again, it's not like you get an extra point for playing Karuga. The payoff is nothing other than your opponent's face when you say reveal Karuga companion.
Yeah, there definitely is I feel like a pretty, there's like a section of the community which gets some sort of like special psychic joy out of their opponents reading their cards, like
Absolutely. And that was my experience the whole day when I played in Melbourne. I said reveal Karuga companion, and my opponents were all, what?
Yeah,
what does that do? Got to pick it up. Some people knew what it was and they just like shook their head.
Yeah, they get that like special tilty feeling of, God, if I lose to this, it's going to be extra
Absolutely, yeah.
Or like kind of speaking of the process thing, because I do like there's obviously 7 Point has a variety of players, right? Some people are the ultra competitive grinders and they play whatever deck they think is best. Some people are like archetype specialists. But I feel like there are like a group of people, probably me included, who really want to win with the deck they can say is theirs. And you, I think, kind of in some ways had a lot of success in this kind of, like field, right? Like your decks are like no one else is making them, right? They definitely are like Loke's decks, hence the like Loke's binder thing. And you also do pretty well with them. Like, tell us, is the process always just like I have a big trade binder and I'm essentially vibing it, or are there like some decks waiting in the wings? Like you just need one or two printings, or some deep pointings to happen. Like, how does the brewing process work?
Yeah, there's definitely cards that yeah, really my Highlander collection 5K that I have all my cards in. There are some heaters in there that are really just hanging around for one more kind of effect. You know, I've played Living End with a bunch of cyclers before. I haven't gone back to Living End since we've had what, like two or so sets with a bunch of cycling cards and monsters that you can get back into play with that kind of thing. I have a Charbelcher pile that I've
Hmm.
gone back to a number of times when we got the second round of modal double face cards, so you didn't have to play any lands. Stuff like the Last Ride in Aether Drift being another Death Shadow variant to complete. Now that we've got four Death Shadow variants now.
Yeah,
Um,
we've got like
and
Last Cry, Death Shadow, Scourge, and I think there's that little known one. It's like the 1313, and it
yeah,
costs less.
Shadow of Mortality.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I'm not sure whether that's if I was to build this Death Shadow thing. I think I would try to go for a Lurus Companion kind of
Mhm.
shell. Um, but yeah, there's certainly in my little box. Basically, every set, I'll go through the whole spoiler and just write down a list of cards I think will be interesting in Highlander.
Yeah.
Um, and with the rate at which cards are printed these days, there's a lot of bench warmers
Hmm.
um, going on in the box that I just haven't had the chance to shine because I'll build one deck for 1 week and then, you know, 3 weeks go by and another set comes out and like there's 6 cards from the last set I didn't get a chance to build with yet, and that just keeps happening over and over again. And at the moment, we've got a league going on in Canberra, so I'm playing Breachbond in that league, so I've had to have Breachbond all put together and assembled, and I didn't want to like pull parts out and build a different deck. So I've been playing Breachbond pretty consistently,
Yeah.
which is obviously going to create a big backlog of cards I'm hoping to brew with.
Yeah, I feel
But
it. It's
yeah,
so hard, hey, especially like on the fetch lane demand where you've got like I'm definitely in this position where I have like 6 decks built, but I kind of need to like shuffle the fetch lanes from one to the other, like depending on what I want to play. Um, and it's like kind of one of the reasons which I end up building Blue Moon a lot just because it's so like not fetch hungry. I'm like I can just have this and all the other decks can still function.
yeah. Back when I was lending out more decks regularly, I used to have a few like shells constructed at all times, and then I would just lend it to people, being like, "Yeah, you need an Arid Mesa or Scalding Tarn, this,
Yeah.
but everything else I've got." Um, but
Out of,
yeah, it's
out of
yeah.
interest, with this with the like the Death Shadow S deck, is Ketramos on your radar, like pulling you away from Lurus as and the other
Mm.
card I'm thinking of is I think there's a spoiler for a Final Fantasy set. It's like a single black 2/3, which I think it like you lose life when it deals damage, but it flips into a 4/4 life link.
Oh yeah, yeah. Definitely, Ketchamus is a card that I didn't really rate when it when it came out. Using Ajani and Ketchamos as examples of cards I've had thoughts on really gives me a look like I have a low hit rate on determining whether something's good or not. But 3 mana didn't impact the board. I wasn't so sure on it, but it looks like it's a pretty good engine card to build around, and you really don't have to build around it very much because Highlander, especially at the moment, you're incentivized to exile things out of the graveyard and exile things out of play. So yeah, Ketramos could be really good. You do have to manage lifelink with Death Shadows. It's kind of awkward sometimes.
Yeah, it's a bit of push and pull. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Out of interest on the kind of you mentioned about knowing when things are working or not. One of like, certainly when I've brewed, one of the things you have to learn to metabolize pretty quickly is disappointment, right? Because you often put something together and you think it's going to be awesome, and it's like it just doesn't land. How do you know when it's not working? Like, can you tell in the gold fishing stage, or is it just based on event results, or are there particular like play patterns and things you're looking for where you're like, oh, this ain't it, or like, yeah, it gives an insight. Like, how do you know when you're onto something and like it's worth more exploration versus like, oh, this one's a dud and it just looked better on paper?
Realistically, most of my goals are just at a proof of concept level. You know, if I can have a Monday night 3 round event where I go 2-1, I'm pretty happy with it. Um, and because I'm building a new deck basically every week, there's not a lot of times that I'll iterate. Breachbond is one of the first instances in which I've kind of specifically dedicated myself to picking an archetype I think is competitively viable.
Mhm.
Most of my brewing is just like, this card's cool. I want to play with this card. I'm gonna find a way to make it work.
Yeah,
Karuga being a prime example. You know, there's no necessarily like competitive drive behind Karuga Companion. It's just, I want to see if this can work.
yeah,
But Breach Bond, really, my aim was to create an archetype and um, prove that there was more than one way to have success with Breach, because I think people had kind of gotten into the attitude of like, well, the only good Breach deck is Lurus Breach, and if Lurus Breach doesn't show up, Breach is bad.
Mhm.
Um, and I think with Breach Bond, I've proven that there's a lot of ways you can build Breach, at
Mhm.
least two. I'm sure there's other ways you can build Breach, and Breach itself is such a powerful card that the deck building restriction to build around it is pretty negligible, because you can win by drawing it or by drawing a tutor for it from almost any board state.
yeah. I'm wondering, do you have any other examples of decks like that? So for example, I have a deck where it's like a Yawgmoth. You know Yawgmoth, the one where it's like you sacrifice the undying creatures and it, quote unquote goes infinite if you've got the
Yeah,
life to pay for it. Um, I've had a similar situation where I'm looking at, I'm like, oh, I can kind of take the Black Walks shell and just take out the Walks cards and put in these Yawgmoth creatures and undying stuff, and maybe I get to play a few more pointed threats now, or I could fit like a flash, package or something. Is it common, do you reckon, that the best way to start if one was to try and brew is to kind of take an established deck and doing like a riff on it, like taking its like 10 card, package which makes it in, changing it to something else, or do you reckon it's better to like just start from scratch?
I think that's a good approach, because a lot of the time when I'm deck building in Magic, uh, and Highlander specifically, like when I was building Infect, I looked at all the modern Infect decks at the time, and I looked at the legacy Infect decks at the time, and I was working out the ratios of like, how many pump spells are they playing? What do the pump spells do? How many creatures are they playing? What thresholds do I need to get to create a shell?
Mm,
And I think taking established shells and then changing things and seeing where you can get advantages, or where you think you can get advantages, is a great idea.
yeah.
And even just like looking at archetypes that are successful in other formats and then trying to emulate in the Highlander, that's definitely an approach I've taken many, many times, to varying degrees of success.
Yeah,
And
any in particular ones which have happened recently?
I think maybe a few months ago I tried doing like an Abzan kind of creature combo kind of thing. I tried doing a Yorian pile that had,
Yep.
like, it had Malira, it had Heliod Ballista, it had like Spike Feeder plus Archangel of Thune. It just had all of the Abzan creature combo stuff in it, that I could possibly jam into it. And then because there were so many different combos, I was like, well, instead of cutting cards, I'll just add a 4/5 flyer to the board, and
Yeah.
that'll get me where I need to go.
It's funny as well, like you mentioned, the looking at cards like in decks from other formats, because I feel like I kind of do this too sometimes. Um, I have a real thing where I like to look at just like decks which people are complaining about or cards which people are complaining about in other formats. Um, and I've found some of them like, do you know this card Divide by Zero from Strixhaven? Where
Oh
like
yeah,
yeah, where like it returns spell or permanent with mana value one or greater, and then you learn, and specifically the lesson which it grabs is like just like 2 mana, get a land, gain 2 life. I found often these cards they're actually like they look silly, but they're usually if they're banned for a reason, even if it isn't just in Pioneer or Standard. Find out them better than they look. Do you reckon there are any cards which people are like kind of sleeping on because they look at it being like, oh, this is like too gimmicky or whatever set for 7 point, but you reckon like are underrated? Like, do you have any particular cards in mind?
maybe Up the Beanstalk would be what I
Oh
would pick. It's such a powerhouse in Standard, and it got banned in Modern, and it is one of those cards that falls into the category you mentioned before, where if we get a couple more elementals or a couple more force kind of cards where it's like, more leyline binding kind of stuff, like you're looking at high mana cost but low actual paying cost. Um, it could really shine. Devastated, I can't play Up the Beanstalk in Karuga, obviously.
yeah, yeah, that would be that's actually like the biggest disappointing anti synergy. It's actually funny. It's funny you mentioned up the beanstalk because I actually am kind of in the process of building one. Like I've been doing it for a while now.
Yeah,
I'm curious to know your thoughts. Like at the moment, my the beanstalk list probably looks a lot like your Breachbond list, um, but it's just like control cards instead of like the combo cards. But at the same time, I like the draw to be black is so strong, right? Like you've got Murderous Cut, you've got the Impending dude, you've got the Delve dudes. Um,
yeah,
out
yeah.
of interest, like when you're thinking about up the beanstalk, what do you think the right package is? Do you have like an intuition about where you would go next?
So yeah, I have built an Up the Beanstalk deck. Yeah, would have been a few months ago. And I think I was 4 colors. I wasn't playing black, but I was playing Radagast. He's like 2 blue green, like 3/5 ward 1. Whenever you cast a CMC 5 or more spell, you can make a 2/2 flyer or a 3/3 ground guy, and that creature also has ward 1. So it's just another kind of payoff card. But now there's there's the overlords, obviously, that really uh, push you in that kind of space. And there's a commander card called Ancient Cellar Spawn. It's like
I've heard of
it
this.
yeah, it has a kind of Vile Smasher ability where it it domes them for the difference between what you paid and what the spell actually cost. So obviously it has a lot of synergy with the overlords. And
Right, and is it
yeah,
Delve spells as well?
yeah, something like that. Yeah, yeah, I
Yeah,
think it
whenever
works
you
with
cast
Delve
a
as
spell,
well.
the amount of mana is less than the mana value, they lose life. Right. So if you dig through time them with this thing, you're really doming them for 8. It's
Yeah,
really fun.
yeah.
Do you remember this card? I think it's called Vile Smasher the Fierce.
Yes, yes. Vile Smash of the Fierce was the old one. And then Ancient Cellar Spawn is the new one. But yeah, there are some strong draws to black.
Yeah.
And just if you're looking at this kind of like maybe graveyard kind of thing, because you've got some delve stuff going on, reanimating a giant monster is a great use of a point.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, my original version was in the no black, and just like playing all the elementals, playing Omnath. I think maybe one of the versions I played Niv Mizzet Reborn, so I was playing black, but just like um, uh, have a couple deck lists on Moxfield that are just entitled "Love to Play Magic,"
Yeah. Yeah.
and they are just 5 color piles of all the best Muldrifters that exist,
Hell yeah.
and just like I built it as kind of a celebration of acquiring my full set of 10 FBBs, so foreign black border duels, and I was just like, I just want to play all the cards that bring a warm feeling to my heart. Muldrifter has been a card I've been very affectionate towards for a long time because everything about it is just, I love drawing cards, I love taking game actions, and yeah, just that kind of like mid-range value pile where you're just like, your opponent's left the table, but you're just like, I'm drawing cards. I've got all these resources.
Yeah, cool.
That was really insightful, Loke. I hope some of the listeners might be inspired to build some of their insert name here binders and terrorize their local weeklies. We like to. Sorry, you go ahead.
If there's any takeaway I can give people is that if someone tells you that this card is unplayable, you'll never have any success with it, take it with a grain of salt, because a lot of the time I've found that you can make underplayed or underrepresented cards really hum by just surrounding them with a bunch of other broken stuff. So yeah, that would be my piece of advice, is just play your pet cards, because Highlander is about, a lot of Highlander for me is about self-expression and playing interesting cards. So yeah.
Well, speaking of self-expression, we like to wrap up with a couple of quick-fire questions. So just try and answer these as quickly as possible without putting too much thought into them. The first one is, would you still play Breachbond if Fastbond went back to 1?
I'd definitely give it a lot of consideration. I'm not sure. You're looking at cutting either Fable or Fourth, or Gifts, but yeah, maybe.
Maybe. Do you prefer foil or non-foil?
Non-foil.
Mental misstep, should it be 1 or 0 points?
I like it at 0.
All right, well, we might have to remove you from the podcast now.
Yeah. Liam and I are both of the strong unbelievers, but no, it's a fun question how to like gauge where the community is at. It's so hard to tell like what the popular sentiment is versus like what the very loud voices in the room know. Hey.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I like giving decks that traditionally don't have access to stack interaction.
Yeah, fair enough. And I guess like Dismember, same thing, right? Like every deck can play this like powerful removal spell theoretically.
Yeah, yep. And you often hear about the times which misstep is incredible, but you don't often see or hear about the times in which it didn't do anything.
Oh, every time it's in my deck, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, they thought seized you, and you're like, all right, whatever. You get my best card. First draw step, misstep. All right, I'm ready for the next one.
Well, the running joke for Liam is misstep is especially important because when he inevitably has nothing but lands in his hands, it's very important that the misstep protects that information from his opponent. So he is especially idiot. Like, thanks so much for joining us, mate. This is a really, really great, interesting conversation. I love a Brewers conversation. I already have like 5 tabs open in my browser with like, I'm like, oh, right, yes, this is what it's going to be. It's going to be Cellar Spawn. It's going to be Vile Smash of the Fierce. I'm going to put Heartless Summoning in, the impending Black Guy. Like, it's all, like, already, whenever I have a brew conversation, I end up always coming away with it with half a deck of list built. So thank you for that. Big fan. Guys, if you are listening to this conversation and you're thinking to yourself, oh, it'd be cool to be on this podcast, I've got a deck or a process or some unique take on Magic which you would like to share, please reach out to Liam and I, because we're always looking for interesting guests to talk to. And please make sure that if you like this podcast, do subscribe to us on